Welcome to Lifelong Echoes, where we explore the remarkable stories of people who changed our world forever. Today, we discover the extraordinary life of Benjamin Franklin, a man who rose from poverty to help create a new nation, invented devices we still use today, and proved that in America, anyone could achieve greatness through hard work and determination. This is the story of how a runaway apprentice became one of the most important people in world history. On January 17th, 1706, in a small wooden house in Boston, Massachusetts, a baby was born who would one day help light the flame of American independence. His name was Benjamin Franklin, and he was the 15th of 17 children in a family so poor that they often wondered how they would feed everyone. Benjamin's father, Josiah Franklin, made soap and candles for a living. It was hard, smelly work that barely earned enough money to support such a large family. When Benjamin was old enough to help, he spent his days dipping wicks into hot wax, making the candles that provided light for Boston's homes and businesses. But young Benjamin had a mind that burned brighter than any candle. He learned to read before he was 5 years old and devoured every book he could find. In a time when most children received little education, Benjamin showed an extraordinary hunger for knowledge. His father, recognizing Benjamin's intelligence, sent him to school when he was 8. But after only 2 years, Josiah could no longer afford the school fees. Benjamin's formal education ended when he was 10 years old. He had learned arithmetic, writing, and reading, but that was all the schooling his family could provide. Josiah tried to interest Benjamin in the candle-making business, but the boy was miserable. He hated the smell of melting tallow and the boring repetition of dipping wicks. Benjamin's eyes were always turned toward Boston Harbor, where ships from around the world brought news, books, and ideas. He dreamed of running away to sea and exploring the world. Worried that Benjamin might actually run away, Josiah looked for a better trade for his son. When Benjamin was 12, Josiah apprenticed him to his older brother James, who owned a printing shop. This decision would change not only Benjamin's life, but the course of American history. Working for his brother James was both a blessing and a curse for young Benjamin. The blessing was that he was surrounded by books, newspapers, and ideas. Everything his curious mind craved. The curse was that James treated him badly, often beating him and making him work long hours for little pay. As an apprentice, Benjamin was bound by law to work for James until he turned 21. He would receive no wages, only food, clothing, and shelter. But Benjamin saw opportunities that others missed. He taught himself to write by copying essays from famous authors, then rewriting them from memory to see how his versions compared to the originals. Benjamin also began reading philosophy, science, and literature. He became a vegetarian to save money, using the coins he saved on food to buy more books. While other boys his age were playing, Benjamin was studying mathematics, natural science, and the art of writing. When Benjamin was 16, James started publishing a newspaper called the New England Courant. Benjamin desperately wanted to write for the paper, but James refused to let his little brother contribute articles. So Benjamin created a secret identity, a middle-aged widow named Silence Dogood. Writing as Silence Dogood, Benjamin submitted witty essays that made fun of Boston's pompous politicians and religious leaders. The articles were so popular that everyone in Boston wanted to know who Silence Dogood really was. Benjamin must have smiled secretly as he listened to his brother and friends speculate about the mysterious writer's identity. But when Benjamin finally revealed that he was Silence Dogood, James was furious rather than proud. Instead of celebrating his brother's talent, James became jealous and began treating Benjamin even more harshly. Finally, Benjamin could take no more. In 1723, at age 17, he broke his apprenticeship contract and ran away from Boston. This was illegal. Runaway apprentices could be arrested and forced to return to their masters. But Benjamin was willing to risk everything for freedom. With barely any money in his pocket, Benjamin boarded a ship to New York, then walked and sailed to Philadelphia. He arrived in the city that would become his home for the rest of his life as a dirty, tired, hungry teenager with no friends and no job. Benjamin's first morning in Philadelphia became one of the most famous scenes in American autobiography. With his last few coins, he bought 3 large, puffy rolls from a bakery. Carrying 1 roll under each arm and eating the third, he walked down Market Street looking for work. A young woman standing in a doorway laughed at this ridiculous sight. The same woman, Deborah Red, would later become his wife. Philadelphia in 1723 was a growing city full of opportunity for someone willing to work hard. Benjamin found a job with a printer named Samuel Keimer and quickly impressed everyone with his skills. He had learned his trade well during his apprenticeship with James. Benjamin's talents soon caught the attention of Pennsylvania's governor, Sir William Keith, who encouraged the young man to start his own printing business. Governor Keith even promised to help Benjamin get established by giving him government printing contracts. Excited by this opportunity, Benjamin sailed to London in 1724 to buy printing equipment. But when he arrived, he discovered that Governor Keith's promises were worthless. There were no letters of credit, no money, and no support. Benjamin was stranded in London with barely enough money to survive. Instead of giving up, Benjamin turned this disaster into an opportunity. He found work at some of London's best printing houses, learning advanced techniques and making important connections. He studied swimming and became so skilled that he gave swimming lessons to earn extra money. He also continued his education by reading voraciously in London's libraries. After 18 months in London, Benjamin returned to Philadelphia with new skills, new ideas, and new determination. By 1728, at age 22, he had started his own printing business. But success didn't come easily. Philadelphia already had several established printers, and competition was fierce. Benjamin succeeded through superior quality, innovative marketing, and sheer hard work. He often worked past midnight, and people walking by his shop would see the light burning in his window long after his competitors had gone to bed. This visible dedication impressed potential customers and helped him build a reputation for reliability. In 1729, Benjamin bought a struggling newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette and transformed it into one of America's most successful papers. He filled it with interesting local news, humorous essays, and practical advice. Unlike other colonial newspapers that mostly reprinted articles from London, Franklin's Gazette focused on American life and American concerns. Benjamin also proved to be a master of what we would now call public relations. When he needed to transport paper for his business, he personally wheeled the wheelbarrow through the streets rather than hiring someone else to do it. People saw him working hard and concluded that he must be prosperous and trustworthy. In 1732, Benjamin began publishing Poor Richard's Almanac, an annual publication filled with weather predictions, astronomical information, and memorable sayings. Many of Franklin's proverbs are still quoted today. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, and a penny saved is a penny earned. The almanac made Benjamin wealthy and famous throughout the American colonies. It sold about 10,000 copies per year, an enormous number for that time, and made Benjamin one of the most widely read authors in America. By his 40s, Benjamin was so successful in business that he could afford to pursue his real passions, science and invention. He had always been fascinated by how things worked and how they could be improved. Benjamin's most famous invention was the lightning rod. In the 1740s, people knew very little about electricity, and lightning strikes regularly destroyed buildings and killed people. Benjamin theorized that lightning was simply a large electrical spark and that it could be safely directed into the ground using a metal rod. To test his theory, Benjamin performed his famous kite experiment during a thunderstorm in 1752. He attached a metal key to a kite string and flew the kite during a lightning storm. When lightning struck the kite, electricity traveled down the wet string to the key, proving that lightning was indeed electrical. This dangerous experiment could have killed him, but it led to one of the most important safety inventions in history. Benjamin also invented the Franklin stove, which heated homes more efficiently than traditional fireplaces. The stove saved wood, reduced smoke, and provided better heat distribution. When the Pennsylvania government offered to give him a patent that would have made him wealthy, Benjamin refused. He believed that since he had benefited from the inventions of others, his own inventions should benefit everyone. Benjamin's scientific work earned him international fame. European scientists invited him to join their prestigious societies, and universities awarded him honorary degrees. The man who had only 2 years of formal education was now considered one of the world's leading scientists. He also invented bifocal glasses for people who needed both distance and reading glasses, the urinary catheter, swim fins, and an improved version of the glass harmonica. Benjamin's inventive mind never stopped working on ways to make life better and more convenient. Benjamin didn't just improve technology, he also worked to improve society. He believed that successful people had a responsibility to help their communities, and he spent decades creating institutions that made Philadelphia a better place to live. In 1736, Benjamin helped organize Philadelphia's first volunteer fire company. Before this, people fighting fires had to rely on bucket brigades that were often too slow and disorganized to save burning buildings. Franklin's fire company was so successful that it became the model for fire departments throughout America. Benjamin also established America's first public library in 1731. At that time, books were expensive, and most people owned very few. Benjamin convinced 50 subscribers to pool their money to buy books that everyone could share. This simple idea spread throughout the colonies and became the foundation of America's public library system. He founded the Academy of Philadelphia, which later became the University of Pennsylvania. He organized the Pennsylvania Hospital, America's first public hospital. He improved Philadelphia's street lighting, organized the city's postal system, and even figured out how to make the streets cleaner by organizing regular garbage collection. Benjamin's approach to civic improvement was always practical and collaborative. Rather than waiting for government to solve problems, he brought together like-minded citizens who were willing to contribute time and money to make improvements. His method of community organizing became a model for American civic engagement. As tensions grew between Britain and the American colonies, Benjamin found himself in a unique position. He was famous and respected on both sides of the Atlantic, making him the perfect person to represent American interests in London. From 1757 to 1775, Benjamin served as a colonial agent in London, trying to resolve disputes between Britain and America peacefully. He loved British culture and initially hoped that Americans could remain British subjects while gaining more self-governance. But British politicians consistently underestimated American determination and overestimated their own power. They imposed tax after tax on the colonies, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, the Townshend Acts, without giving Americans any voice in Parliament. Taxation without representation, Americans complained, was tyranny. Benjamin tried to explain American viewpoints to British leaders, but they refused to listen. In 1766, he testified before Parliament about the Stamp Act, warning that forcing Americans to pay taxes they had no voice in approving would lead to rebellion. His testimony helped convince Parliament to repeal the Stamp Act, but they soon imposed new taxes that were just as offensive to Americans. The final break came in 1774 when Benjamin was publicly humiliated by British officials who accused him of stirring up trouble in America. Standing silently as they denounced him before a room full of sneering aristocrats, Benjamin realized that reconciliation was impossible. Britain would never treat Americans as equals. Benjamin returned to Philadelphia in 1775 convinced that America must fight for independence. The man who had spent 18 years trying to preserve the British Empire was now ready to help destroy Britain's control over America. At age 70, when most men were preparing for retirement, Benjamin Franklin began the most important phase of his career. He became one of the key leaders of the American Revolution and helped create the United States of America. Benjamin was the oldest member of the Continental Congress and one of the committee of 5 men who drafted the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Though Thomas Jefferson wrote most of the document, Franklin made several important contributions and helped ensure that the Declaration was both inspiring and practical. When John Hancock famously said after signing the Declaration, "We must all hang together," Franklin replied with characteristic wit, "Most assuredly, or we shall all hang separately." But Franklin's most crucial contribution to American independence came as a diplomat in France. In 1778, at age 72, he sailed to France to convince the French government to support America's fight against Britain. This was an almost impossible mission. Why should France risk war with powerful Britain to help a small group of rebellious colonies that might lose their fight for independence? Franklin succeeded through a combination of charm, intelligence, and shrewd understanding of French politics. Franklin played the role of a simple American philosopher, wearing plain brown clothes instead of the elaborate costumes favored by French aristocrats. He presented himself as a representative of American simplicity and virtue, contrasting with what he portrayed as British corruption and tyranny. The French were enchanted. They saw Franklin as the embodiment of Enlightenment ideals, a self-made man who had risen through merit rather than birth, a scientist who unlocked nature's secrets, a philosopher who championed human progress. In 1778, France signed an alliance with America, providing the money, ships, and soldiers that made American victory possible. Without French support, the American Revolution would likely have failed. Benjamin returned to Philadelphia in 1785 as America's most famous citizen. At age 79, he could have retired comfortably, but the new nation still needed his wisdom and experience. In 1787, Benjamin was the oldest delegate at the Constitutional Convention, where America's leaders gathered to create a new system of government. The convention nearly collapsed as delegates from large and small states argued bitterly about representation in Congress. When the convention seemed ready to fail, Franklin gave a speech that helped save American democracy. He reminded the delegates that they had accomplished the impossible by winning independence, and he urged them to compromise rather than let the perfect become the enemy of the good. Franklin's presence lent dignity and wisdom to the proceedings. Though he was too weak to speak for long periods, his brief comments often provided the perspective needed to resolve difficult disputes. He was one of only 3 men to sign the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris ending the Revolutionary War, and the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin died on April 17, 1790, at age 84. His funeral was attended by 20,000 people, nearly the entire population of Philadelphia. Ships in the harbor lowered their flags to half-mast, and Congress declared a month of mourning. Benjamin Franklin's life proves that in America, anyone can rise as high as their talents and determination will take them. From a poor candlemaker's son to one of the most important people in world history, Franklin embodied the American dream before America even existed as an independent nation. He showed that success comes not from birth or luck, but from curiosity, hard work, and the willingness to help others. Franklin never stopped learning, never stopped improving himself, and never forgot his responsibility to make his community better. Franklin's legacy lives on in countless ways. Every time you check weather forecasts, visit a public library, call the fire department, or mail a letter, you benefit from institutions that Franklin helped create or improve. His inventions still protect buildings from lightning, and his ideas about civic responsibility still inspire community leaders. Most importantly, Benjamin Franklin proved that one person, armed with curiosity, determination, and concern for others, can change the world. He reminds us that the best way to predict the future is to create it. Thank you for joining us on this inspiring journey through Benjamin Franklin's remarkable life. Remember, no matter where you start in life, with enough determination and hard work, you can achieve greatness while helping others along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to Lifelong Echoes for more inspiring stories that help you learn English while discovering the extraordinary lives of extraordinary people.